Hi, I am now live. I am Alexa Hampton. This is 52 weeks of design, and we're a little on the late end today, 5 hours later. And today I'm talking to the amazing Mitch Owens, who so sweetly said we could do it at this hour. And here I'm putting him in. Invite. Hey.
Hey, love.
Got my wine. Cheers.
I have my martini.
I mean, it's kind
Cheers.
of like wine and water. Cheers.
Excellent. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me. You've spent me
so great to see you.
Well, you've had me spending all day working on lighting and flowers, and it's still not right. You still look better than I do.
I just pulled all the the pillows off my bed because I was like, that looks crazy. And my sofa got taken away today to be recovered. So I was like,
oh.
I got to find a perch. How are you?
Very well. Nice to see you.
So you have a lot of new things going on. And I'm very
just a few. Just a few.
Just a few. And you are never one to have little going on anyway. But I've never heard your origin story. I've never heard how you got into this world. So you got to tell me.
Okay. Like everybody who would say the same thing, I grew up with parents who had antiques. They liked antiques. They weren't good antiques. I wouldn't own those antiques. Hello, golden oak. No. But it was really exciting to see, my mother in whatever garage of whatever city, whatever state we lived in. She was always. I don't
think I knew you were a military brat.
I was a military brat, indeed. But she was always stripping furniture or repainting it or going to flea markets. And I ended up writing, but I was the theater critic at the Dallas Observer in Dallas, Texas. And I wasn't making enough money. So I basically cold called.
How old were you when you were doing that?
21.
How did you get that job?
I wrote a sample theater review after going to see a production of, I think it was The Cherry Orchard at Dallas Theater Center. And I got a phone call from the features editor, and she asked if I'd like to fill in for the theater critic, who was, of all things, going to, as I recall, Peru to join the Peace Corps.
I mean, it's an obvious transition. Wait a sec. How did you what were you studying, and did they know how old you were? And
I don't think they knew how old I was. I had gone for 2 years to a small college in South Carolina called Coker. I'm a Southerner from a long time back. And I moved to Dallas to be with great friends of mine who were much older, who were seniors. When I was a sophomore, they were seniors, they graduated. I went to live with them.
To be clear, not 80-year-olds.
No, not 80-year-olds. But I went to Dallas to live with them for a summer. Weirdly got this job at the same time I was the executive secretary for the head of an ad agency. I was an awful secretary. But he kept me on and let me write my articles at my desk. And I wasn't making enough money. So I cold called, more or less, a wonderful local magazine called Dallas Fort Worth Home and Garden. And the editor-in-chief, Karen Muncie, who I hope is on this Instagram Live, I came in for an interview. She gave me a sample article to write. I went and interviewed the homeowner, came back. The article was accepted.
And again, you're 21.
I was like 20. Yeah, I just turned probably 22 probably. And she said, we have an open position. Would you like to be the features editor? And I said, I don't know anything about design. And she had two responses, basically. One was, do you know what you like? And I said, yes. She said, fine, you'll learn about the rest. And then she said, what are your favorite magazines? And I
That
said,
was some writing sample.
it was fun. I think I've still got it somewhere. I must look at it again. And then she said, what magazines do you read? And I said, Tatler and the World of Interiors. That's about it. And she said, can you start Monday?
Wow.
And I did.
That is so cool. Um, and where did the Tatler and World of Interiors come from?
I
What?
think I was always a huge Anglophile as a child, and anything English really excited me to read about: history, fashion, literature. And I think I liked the World of Interiors and Tatler so much because of their use of language. They, I mean, obviously the World of Interiors was cheeky visually, and I thought incredibly erudite text-wise, whereas the Tatler was just cheeky all over, and they used words that were bigger than I was used to using. So it was a real learning experience for me. And I also like the rhythm. I used to read articles and books aloud when I was a child.
Really?
Yeah, because I liked the rhythm of a sentence, and I think that's something that's held me in very good stead throughout my career. I still read my articles aloud to see if there's a beat that's missing or a word that sounds wrong.
Well, that explains a lot about how beautifully you speak.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to let you know, my mother, when I was in kindergarten, my mother was called into the principal's office. She was deeply annoyed because I never did anything wrong. When you grow up in the military, the last thing you want to do is end up in your father's service file that he cannot control his family or children.
Right.
So I was really
That's a
good.
great metaphor, anyway. You don't want to end up in your parents' service
Service.
file.
No, you don't. But my mother was called in, and she wanted to know what I had done. And the principal was there with my teacher, and she said, Mitchell used the word marsupial in class. And my mother said, that must have been from his father. He didn't learn it from me. And my father had just come back from
What
Australia.
do you think it meant?
They said I knew exactly what it meant.
But so why were they calling your mother in?
It was like a kindergartner. Why would a kindergartner know that word?
But were
But my
they
father,
calling her in to celebrate her and to pat her on the back?
no.
This is
But
great.
my father had just come back from a med cruise to Australia, and it brought me a stuffed toy platypus and a stuffed koala bear. So I knew what marsupials were.
I still don't understand why that's cause for a parent visit.
I don't know either.
Wow. Creepy.
Well,
Creepy.
now I have a 5-year-old who knows what canopic jars are and what goes into them. So
Yeah.
I think it's sort of the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it is the same. How is Gemma?
She is obstreperous. She is Dennis the Menace. She can take apart anything mechanical within seconds, and it will never go back together again. Um, she's a funny one. She's, as you know, I have an elder daughter who's 20, and they could not have been more different at this age.
How fun
Gemma's
to get her.
Gemma's the test. Gemma's the test on whether I have a massive heart attack and just drop dead.
Good. As a second daughter, that may be that may be what our job is. It's a secret job description we get. Did you have siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have one younger sibling who's 3 years younger than I am. He's in the army, and we loathed each other our entire childhood, hated each other. And now we're quite friendly, which is very nice.
That is very nice. Okay. Um, I love the dampening, quite friendly. But anyway, Okay, so you are now the editor at Dallas Fort Worth Home and Garden,
Yes.
and
An editor, yes.
and an editor. That's what I meant. And how long were you there?
I think I may have been there 3 years, and I was also freelancing at the Dallas Morning News. I used to write television reviews, those little weekend
Sure.
reviews that are like 5 sentences about a movie. So it was always, you know, I always had to write sort of things like jealousy rears its ugly head and
Right.
Joan Crawford
You
decides
were
to kill him.
blurbing.
Yeah, I was blurbing, and
Yeah.
it was great fun. And I used to do this at about 11 o'clock at night at the Dallas Morning News, and it was fun. And then I ended up, where did I go next? I got a job in Houston working for a magazine called Ultra, which was like the Vanity Fair of Houston. And it was a really good learning experience, even though I was there for 1 month. And I moved to Washington, D.C., and worked for a local real estate magazine.
Oh, okay.
So I wrote stories about old houses, basically. And then um, I was working there, and I got a job offer to go back to Texas and work for Texas Monthly. At least the umbrella was Texas Monthly. They had a really great regional shelter publication called Domain, which I wish still existed. And so I went back, and I was the features editor there, and wrote and styled and scouted and um, did everything until I came to New York City about 2 years later. And I saw, do you remember the Metropolitan Home Show House?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it was the very first Metropolitan Home Show House. An editor from El Decor was there, the late, great, much sainted Charles Bricker, who had been a star writer for the World of Interiors. And we hit it off. And he said if there was, El Decor had just started, I think they had one issue or two.
So what year?
And hmm,
What year are we?
that would have been 89.
Mhm.
89, summer of 89. And Charles said, if any job came open, would you be interested in moving to New York? And I said, of course. And I think about 3 months later, I got a job offer. I came to New York, I interviewed, and got the job as features. I think I was features, no, associate features editor. I think that's right. And it, so I moved to New York, and I slept on Charles's floor for a few weeks until I found a little tiny apartment in Spanish Harlem, which was the only landlord in New York that would take me and my chow chow.
Oh my goodness. So it's interesting hearing this peripatetic path, and how that, it makes me think that, my husband was not a military brat, but his father was in politics, and so was
Mm-hmm.
civil servant. I'm sorry, it's 6 o'clock, isn't it?
You
So
need another drink.
he has, moved all of his life, um, and I think was, until I got my hands on him, open to moving, and in the way that it sounds like, and I know that you continued moving, and you've lived in a lot of fabulous places as grown up. So on the one hand, you have this completely ruthless lack of nostalgia about where you're living, but at the same time, your focus is these nostalgic. It's a yearning for a beautiful old house. Even the
Yes,
Instagram that you said you followed, so it's all very related to how you were raised, one going towards and one going against.
yes. I will say, and maybe there are people on the Instagram who would understand this quote, um, which I think feeds into what you just said. My mother said that the only bad thing about growing up in the military is that you had absolutely no friends from childhood. None.
Ew.
On the positive side of growing up in the military, you could be
You have no
airlifted.
friends from childhood.
None for childhood. On the other hand, you could be airlifted anywhere in the world, dropped, and by the end of the week, you'd have a home and a job, and you would have new friends on the block, which is true, which I think has held me in very good stead in terms of interviewing, because everybody is a new experience. Everyone is, I'm not afraid to interview people. I've never had people. Um, but I'm really fascinated by how people live and why they live with what they live with, because I think, Gloria Vanderbilt said it best. Decorating is autobiography, or it really damn well should be. And so I'm always looking at how people live, why they chose that color, why they chose that lamp, that glass, that brand of gin, anything. I'm really interested in how people create the world around them or reject the world that came before. I'm really fascinated by that.
How do you reconcile that then with the field of design? Given that it's not an autobiographer, it's a biography. If design is autobiography and you hire somebody to help you, you're hiring a ghostwriter.
You're hiring a ghostwriter, but I also hope you're hiring somebody who, if you're an enlightened client, they will help you tell your own story better than you could on your own.
Yeah.
You're the editor. You're like the
Yeah.
other person at a magazine when I turn an article in. You're the editor who's looking over my text and trying to make it better. So I think that, unless you're doing it yourself, that's what you should allow your decorator to do.
Yeah.
Is to really tell your story.
So your house, which we have on the 52 weeks slides,
It's a mess of a house.
no, it's gorgeous. Did anybody help you with that, or at this point you just know
No,
who you are,
no,
where you want to
no.
be?
And we decorate in a really strange way, my husband and I. Matthew was really great at finding furniture and objects and china and things like that. I'm really good at arranging furniture and placing items. So what we've tended to do in the past, as our current house, he found a really beautiful custom made sofa covered in this sort of elaborate Persian-ish floral.
Yeah.
And I said, fine, that's what we'll decorate the room around. And that's exactly how we decorate.
And I
So
love your furniture plan. It looks like the scale of the pieces and how they speak to each other, and it's exactly. Hold on, let me pull it up while I talk to you.
uh-oh.
No.
But what I like about it is it's a floral pattern. So I thought all florals go together, just like all reds go together, just like all greens go together, et cetera, et cetera. So we've just basically packed the sitting room with floral fabrics and wallpaper that have a largely red part to their palette. So it's a little, not consciously, but it's a little Diana Vreeland, Billy Baldwin. It's a little Mario Buata for the Theodore Coppolases.
But
Theodore Coppolai.
I love the slipper chairs in front of the fender bench with that table. There's it's and I love these bookcases that you're making.
Yes, my husband makes this.
They gorgeous. They're gorgeous. So it doesn't surprise me to live so beautifully, but it does a little bit because it looks so, like what can't you do, you nuisance?
Well, no, but it's also, I think, to look at a room like that, as you will know, we have 3 dogs, so it's a multiplicity of patterns is really forgiving.
Oh yeah. Yes, I have to paint a sisal in my entrance hall because Percy just anointed it.
See, if you get a floral, like a Turkish carpet with lots of flowers, trust me, it won't.
Yeah.
Nobody notices.
It'll take it all. And I know you are a self-proclaimed chairaholic, and you have
Yeah, that's bad.
of beautiful chairs. I
Yeah,
love
I
it.
like chairs. I still have my chair, my rocking chair when I was 3. Um, it's in Gemma's room now. But yeah, I like chairs because they are they're human. You know, they have arms, they have legs, they have a back. They just don't have a head. Um, and they tend to be quirky. The
Yeah.
ones I like. I have a real affection for 19th century chairs, Victorian chairs, Biedermeier chairs that are the sort of thing probably other people don't necessarily live with. Um, I, I like I like things other people don't necessarily have,
Oh
or
yeah.
that are out of fashion.
Yeah. Well, fashion being the
Slope.
slippery thing that it is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. You don't want to be out of fashion, but you don't want to be a slave to it.
No, I think you want to have style, which
Yeah.
is different from fashion.
Totally. So when you made the choice between, you were doing these other writing gigs and
Mm.
said, okay, I'm going to take this El Decor job and I'm going to move to New York and that's going to be my focus. Did you feel like, okay, now I'll never cheat the on the world of style again?
Yes. You mean in terms of a subject matter to focus on?
And I mean, obviously, you're a culture vulture.
Um, I've the nice thing about working at El Decor was that I was also allowed to, uh, for a period after I started there, a great friend of mine, Barbara Graustark, who's an editor at the New York Times, asked me to work freelance for her. So I did a lot of culture things. At the same time, I was working for El Decor. So I wrote about everything from civic planning in Dayton, Ohio, um, which is when your father told me there's always something to see no matter where you go, um, to fashion collecting, to everything. So it sort of kept me stretching. I did travel stories for the travel section. I did an antique column where I shared an antique column with Rita Reif at arts and the arts section. And I still sort of wrote primarily interior design stories for El Decor. And then I left El Decor, um, not for any dreadful reason other than there were cutbacks and I had to go. And I remember very delightedly the memory of Marion McAvoy, but at that time was my editor in chief. And you know, you had to go and sort of talk. So I knew I was going because I was like, you know, last hired, first gone. And she was so funny, and she made me think how wonderful she was because I walked in, and the first thing I said was, "I'm leaving, aren't I?" And she said, "Oh, thank God, I don't have to tell you." And I just thought it was one of the funniest things I'd ever heard, and I loved it, which was a great thing because it pushed me out of a very secure nest. And I went to work for Departures,
But you
freelanced.
know, you know,
I freelanced for Departures. I worked at Nest. I worked at Travel and Leisure. I worked at a lot of places because of that. And that was really hugely helpful. And I did go back to El Decor twice
yeah.
after that. And then went to Morocco for a few years where I still worked for them, weirdly enough.
Um, when you were in Morocco, were you? I know. My saying like, where do you live? And you're like, in Morocco. I was like, what? Um, were you just in the design world there? Because it's such a big expat design world, as well as in and of it.
No, no, you know, I really wasn't. What I was then a contributing editor for El Decor, and I was also a contributing editor for Travel and Leisure. So I mean, we chose Marrakesh because it had an international airport and you could go in and out of the country easily. We chose Morocco because it was right after 9/11, and I felt it was incredibly important to live in an Arabic country. I was um, really adamant about doing that.
You guys just picked like there were no familial
No,
connect.
we knew one person in Morocco, this extraordinary woman, Marianne Loom Martin, and her husband, but we knew no one else. And we sold the apartment. We were living in Washington Heights in Manhattan, and we sold the apartment and we moved to Morocco for 3 years with a 3-year-old.
Yeah. How old is Gemma, by the way, right now?
5.
5. Um, don't I remember reading something you wrote once saying you had family from or
Sorry?
did you have you had family from Algeria or somewhere?
I did one of those great, 23andMe, whatever. Um, I'm my elder daughter is mixed race. I am ancestrally mixed race, slaveholders as well as free blacks as well as slaves on multiple branches of my father's side of the family, which I didn't know growing up at all, but did. And from one of those 23andMe moments, um, it looks like whatever African ancestry I have comes from the area of what is now Angola. So I'd love to visit there one day. I'd be fascinated to go and see that area of the world.
Yeah, you have to. Wow. Um, so I had when I read that I somehow made it in my head why you had gone to Morocco, that there was some more overt action. So how cool to just it's kind of horrible that you were so close and yet haven't been yet. But
No, it was crazy. It's funny when you said about being in the design world in Marrakesh. I wasn't at all. Um, we were just living day by day in this very big ramshackle, and I do mean ramshackle, I'm not kidding, Riyadh, which had one um, light bulb, no kitchen. It was bigger than we needed, but I wanted to live in the Medina. I didn't want to live in the Gaulies, in the more French, more modern part. Um, I wanted, I wanted to be Moroccan as much as I could.
yeah.
Um, as being an outsider, I enjoy being an outsider. I love that. I love
Is
it
it being an
because
outsider or is it being an observer?
I think it's both. I
Yeah.
like being distant. I like watching. I like listening. I don't necessarily want to be part of, I don't know, the 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 fashionable world, which there is a lot of that in Marrakesh,
Yeah.
and we knew some incredibly magnificent human beings. It was a huge maturing process for me to live abroad. I'd never lived abroad before. My husband went to school in Switzerland and France, and I really wanted to have that experience. And my French, then as now, is appallingly rudimentary. My Arabic is down to about 5 words.
Uh-huh.
Our elder daughter picked up Arabic so quickly in
Really?
school and through our housekeeper, who very smartly said to me right after we hired her, this beautiful young girl named Maria Unzal, she said, Catherine's going to hear English from you and French at school. Do you mind if I only talk to her in Arabic? And I said, I don't mind.
So
And but she picked it up. But Arabic was Catherine's first language, really. So when we came back to America when she was 6, you she would say a sentence, and 5 words would be Arabic, 2 would be French, and 1 would be English, and you would just stare at her and have no idea what she was talking about. And it was very hard for her to be, go to an American kindergarten, which she had to take over again because of the
sure.
language issues. It was very hard. And
Um,
I picked up so many Arabic
she
phrases.
has a lifelong gift.
Yeah, I
That
hope that she'll take Arabic again and it will kick in. She did spend a year abroad in high school in France, and all of her French came back, which was nice.
yeah. Is she interested in design?
No, no, not at all.
Is she interested
Zero.
in writing?
No, she is interested in, she is an extraordinary, she has a great talent for makeup and a great talent for hair. And so I am, she has a great deal of interest in pursuing a career in um, cosmetology, whether it's in theater or television
Yeah.
or owning her own salon. I mean, she's really, really
She
gifted.
couldn't be at a more perfect moment in time for that, where it is such an expression of creativity and men are using makeup as well as women, and it's this, yeah, how exciting.
Well, what I think what interests her a lot is we live in central New York State, and she has said to me more than once, there are not a lot of places for, there are not a lot of salons that are focused on women of color.
Yeah,
And she wants to help fill that gap.
that's so cool. It's so great how she's still really young. It's so great that she knows what she wants to do.
So she's
That,
majoring in business administration.
oh, sorry.
I know.
Excited there, and then you lost me. No, 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 no.
I can't even balance a checkbook.
That's
So
good.
it's fascinating to me that she wants to do this.
Yeah, whatever she ends up doing, that'll be good for her to have, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so when did you come back from? I mean, I know when you came back from Morocco, given that you just said 89 and then you said 3 years, so I'm guessing 92.
No,
And,
actually, there were there were a couple of
or
moments,
no,
but
89 was L. It was going.
that's when I first went to El Decor, and then I had a series of years, and I came back from Morocco in 2005. I think that was right, and I worked for a period of time at Traditional Home, which I hugely enjoyed because it was a whole different world for me. I think for if you're going to be in journalism, it's whether you consider design writing journalism or not. I do.
Of course,
Um, I think it's very important for you to do high, low, and middle. It's hugely important. You just cannot be. Um,
you have to be well read to be well
you
written.
have to be well read. You have to. You know, my roots personally are not the world of interiors or El Decor or departures or whatever. My roots are probably growing up Better Homes and Gardens, you know? And I don't think you can ever forget that. You know, I like really fancy things, but I did not come from a fancy background in the slightest. And I have to remember that every single day. Um, you know, I'm not from that world, but I really appreciate that world, and I like trying to understand that world.
I still think that that's what makes Americans Americans. I mean,
Yeah,
sure, there's some, robber barons in their family who have a very different
yeah.
experience, but the rest of us get to observe and pick and fantasize and create out of whole cloth.
And there are things that I really love in extremely extravagant, opulent interior design, and there are things that I love on the whatever you would consider to be the lower end.
Right.
There
The
there are
other,
just things I like,
yeah.
you know, and I think that's it's just a part of who I am. I think it's a part of who we are. Um, you
Well,
know,
beauty, the forms of beauty, you know, the form is beautiful or it isn't, regardless of if it's made of bullion,
yes,
gold bullion, or um, a piece of pine.
no, I agree with you. I think it's hugely important. You know, as long as it has integrity, I'm completely fine with it. You know, I mean, it doesn't, as long as it's grounded, it has roots, it has integrity, I'm completely fine with it, except for mission furniture. I really hate mission
I
furniture.
don't love mission furniture myself.
Mm. When I lived in Austin, Texas, I couldn't find a place that I could afford to rent an apartment or anything. And so I house sat um, for a very nice guy who had a house in the hill country. And I didn't realize until I got to his house that it was wall-to-wall Mission furniture, which is bar none the most uncomfortable, unyielding
Mhm.
um, furniture I've ever sat in. So I spent most of my first year in Austin, either sitting on the floor or just piling all the cushions around. It's hugely uncomfortable, but I appreciate it as an art form.
Yeah, and there's a purity to it and a rigor.
Mhm.
There you don't see like a little bit of it.
No, I like the history of
There
it.
you're in or you're out.
You're in or you're out,
Yeah.
precisely.
Um. So back to journalism
Yes.
and whether design or not. What about okay? So you love observing or being quote unquote on the outside. Um, but you Instagram obviously has given you a whole different life. um I mean, not totally different because you're doing what you're doing, what you've always done, but we all get to, those of us who are totally interested, as am I, we get to follow you on these deep dives. They're mini because you can only write so much on a post,
Precisely.
but you do these, we get to dip our toe into a moment from the 50s, or over here we're looking at a tassel trim, or
Mm.
how has that changed your life?
I've always been hugely interested in history. I've always been hugely interested in. I. It sounds weird, but I take it as a point of pride to look for the overlooked, and I think that's what Instagram allows me to do. It seems that so many people who are interested in design have basically five names at their fingertips, so they're constantly regurgitating, Elsie DeWolf or Dorothy Draper or whatever, which is wonderful because they are hugely important individuals in the development of design in America, but or anywhere in the world. But I get super excited learning about someone like, I don't know, Miss Gertrude Geen from Chicago,
Is she the one who
or
did the casino?
no, that was
That
oh, sorry, I've forgotten what it was. A casino. Uh, it, it, I can't remember now. It's horrible. But
anyway, yeah.
interior design. There weren't just a baker's dozen of great decorators in the 20th century. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of decorators all across the country, and I will say that I have been pushed in that direction over the last 20 years by my very close friendship with Louis Bofferding,
Mhm.
who's, as you know, an eminent American dealer and
And brilliant.
and brilliant. And he's taught me. He's my best friend.
Rue Carpenter. Somebody
Rue
just
Carpenter, thank you. And
thank you.
Louis is my best friend, and he's taught me so much about how, like your father telling me that one time over lunch when I was complaining about going to Dayton, Ohio, and he said, "There's always something to see no matter where you go," which is a really logical, practical, pragmatic Midwestern thing to say.
Mhm.
And I'm married to a Midwesterner, and I and Louis is a Midwesterner. He's from Minneapolis, and you realize that there were great as a loose word. There were great decorators in Des Moines. There were great decorators in Dallas. There were great decorators in Galveston. Um, and they've been largely forgotten,
Mhm.
absolutely forgotten. And I love knowing about them. And so Instagram allows me to periodically post, I hope, inspiring obscurities
Would you ever do a book on that?
on inspiring obscurities.
Yeah.
Only if I own my own publishing house or my own imprint. Um,
Why?
because I
No,
remember,
I mean,
no. I remember telling Grace Dudley once, we were talking about some weird enthusiasm, And I said, oh my God, I'd love to write a book about that. And she said, I would love for you to write that book too, because then our dozen friends could all buy a copy and hand it out to each other at Christmas, which I
Okay.
totally understood her point.
Okay,
Because,
but still, what obviously that conversation happened a long time ago, right?
well, no, I think that there are some, publishing houses have overheads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that would be a weird dream of mine, along with owning an inn in Alsace-Lorraine where all the furniture is for sale. And I could cook breakfast
Okay,
and
but still,
dinner, but you're on your way for lunch.
but you are an accomplished journalist, and as you said, you love research, or you said it in the yeah, you said it in the
I love research. I think I could I think I could probably be really happy as an archivist. And
so, but that is, your Instagram is educational. It's beautifully written. It's like this little story, whatever little story you want to drop before us, pearls before swine. All of us who are reading it are like gobbling it up. It's all so evocative as your writing is. Your voice is so strong, and there's such a reverence for that which has preceded the present. And if those people are being lost, um, to posterity, and there are all those great stories to tell, somebody needs to tell those stories, and who better than you?
I think there are a lot of,
Because your love comes through.
but I think there are a lot of young journalists, young design students, you know, Parsons, New York School of Interior Design, et cetera, people who, well, it's funny when I post these things, I'm hoping that some of them are following me and might
Get the
go
germ.
down that rabbit hole and say, oh, maybe I should look at that archive that hasn't been cracked since it was donated to Beinecke or Parsons or whatever. Maybe there's something in there that I can learn about, explore. Um, I just think I'm just
So that's a
an
hard no.
eternal student.
So that's a no. Absolutely not.
No,
No, absolutely
I
not.
have other things I have to
Yeah.
finish.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Other things.
Now tell me about that. What other things do you have to finish?
I've been working on some really lovely projects. The longest aborning one is a biography of Pauline de Rothschild, who's always fascinated me. That's been going on for at least 20 years. Um, I just finished working with Alex Papachristides
Yes, I
on
know.
his forthcoming book, which is super exciting.
When is the
Um,
publishing date?
I believe it's this fall. I believe it comes out this fall. I worked on a book with uh, Tom Kligerman of I Kligerman Barkley. That was great
Yes.
fun. Um, a few other things in the pipeline, but I really enjoy it because projects like that, I get to interview people I really admire, and they're less they're less interviews than they are like this. They're just sort of fun conversations, and my job is to take everything they've said and create a text that sounds like them, that um, honors their work, that appreciates their work, and that I hope illuminates corners of their work that maybe even they haven't thought about.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. I mean, that is what you're bringing. You're that immense, beautiful brain of yours, and your wit. Um, Tell me about the world of interiors. How great of a homecoming is that to
I
offer,
am to use the British word chuffed beyond
and
measure. I am
perhaps
like
gobsmacked? No, not
fluffed
gobsmacked.
like a little bird. I'm over the moon. Because as a when I was young, I always admired, worshipped um, Condé Nast publications, even though I don't think I really understood what the company was. I mean, I knew magazines they published, Vogue, World of Interiors, House and Garden, and in recent years, World Architectural Digest, Gourmet, all these other publications that had a huge impact on my little tiny world as a youngster. And um, I'm hugely gratified, hugely pleased, hugely chuffed, hugely um, modest. I'm very happy to be a cog in this machine,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of fun. I've been working for them since January, and I couldn't be happier and more inspired and delighted. Um, it's a great publication. I mean, as you know, it's an adventuresome publication. It's a publication that values not only um, the text, verbiage, eccentricity in writing, as well as eccentricity in what the camera is trained on. And I think that teaches a lot of us. I know when I was working at Architectural Digest, and I think this says a lot. Um, I remember Amy Astley, who's the editor-in-chief of Architectural Digest, and we were kicking around talking about magazines we love. And it's really something when it's, um, whatever editor I've ever worked with, whether it's Karen Muncie or Margaret Russell or Amy Astley or anybody at any magazine, they always look at World of Interiors as a touchstone. They
Mm-hmm.
all admire it,
Sure.
which I think says a lot for the magazine. I think it says a lot for the spirit of it, that editors in chief of other publications respect it. They don't feel competitive with it. They don't feel jealous of it. They just feel this sort of open-armed camaraderie, which
Mm-hmm.
is a really wonderful feeling to have.
Oh my gosh, sorry, a huge shaft of sunlight is creeping
Ah,
in. How dare that sunlight emerge?
but I always felt the same thing with Maison et Jardin, which I loved. I
Yeah.
loved Vogue Living. Um, I find it impossible not to read shelter publications wherever they are, um, because I just want to know how people live.
Is la réussite de la connaissance française? Is that what it is? It's like
Connaissance des arts? Oh, wait,
uh,
no, connaissance française.
it's I think now the finest rooms in France, but its
Oh,
original
yes.
version was the connaissance or la réussite.
Right.
Uh, was that I feel like that book, which I always loved, that two
Well,
volumes.
no, but there are multiple books. There are more than two. There are gardens
Oh
and
no,
other
yes, and
things.
they've got the little asterisk.
Yeah,
Yes, I think I have like four,
I read
but
those. I read those a lot. I have
they're so Mitch.
multiple copies.
They're amazing.
They're amazing. I have multiple copies of them. It's uh, it, and even it's funny. Even though you might open them and you might see an interior that you've seen published in another magazine, which certainly happens if it's a magnificent interior. It, it's all about how you, as an editor, a photographer, a writer, see a room, a house, a garden that may have been published before, but in a different angle, in a different conversation with the writer, different conversation with the owner, the designer, the gardener. I mean, I love to talk to the gardener. Who's actually keeping this intact.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a hugely important thing for me as a writer, to not just to talk to the owner and the landscape designer. I want to talk to the person who's pruning, I
Yeah.
want to talk to the person who's shoveling manure. I want to talk to the person who can tell me, well, the landscape designer thought this was a really great plant, but it died after a year. It just didn't work. Um, there are so many little rabbit holes to go down in design. Um, and that's what I love about it.
And you also love, okay, so that's mental travels, right?
Yes.
It's your imagination. You're you're tapping into the community surrounding a property or a house or whatever. And then you are tapping into the past, but you also are, military brat that you are, a big lover of just going places. And you have
Yeah.
this other job, which is as a host of some of these Indigare travel trips.
Those are great fun. I started doing that.
Effing lucky. I wanted to be on that Lebanon trip that you went on.
Oh, I wish you'd
Oh,
been there. We would have had such a great time. And we ended up going to this very louche club. And I think you and I would have embarrassed ourselves enormously.
yeah, we might be doing that right now. Um,
I started
I
doing that.
almost went on that. I almost went because I was like, oh my God, if Mitch is doing this, this will be the greatest thing I could do. And then I think something happened where I couldn't go. Um,
Yes. I don't remember what it was, but
but it was,
I
yeah,
love those trips.
right
I
up to
love
the
those
line.
trips a lot. Um, Indigare is an extraordinary organization. Melissa Biggs Bradley, who was at
Spencer,
Town and Country for years.
yeah.
She's brilliant. She's fun. She's nice. Um, she's adventuresome. She's the sort of person my mother would approve of. Like, you could imagine her being dropped anywhere in the world, and she'd have friends in 2 days. Um, it's wonderful because you get to take, say, 14 to 20 people somewhere in the world they've always wanted to go and meet with architects, designers, museum curators, shopkeepers, landscape people, whatever within that world.
Right.
And I think what was fascinating, I think probably one of the most fascinating trips we took was Lebanon, because Beirut is a hugely complicated city within a hugely complicated country of great allure, culturally, foodways, art, architecture, many many things. And we had um, this really wonderful group of adventuresome people who just wanted to have a deep dive. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to go, and that's the great thing about Indigare. Nobody wants to go and see the shop that you can find elsewhere, the things that they've
Right.
seen on their friends' Instagrams. They want to find something different. And I remember one of the things we were able to do, which I was over the moon about. A woman I admire enormously is an architect and designer named Annabelle Karim Kazar, who's French. She's married to a Lebanese, this incredible Lebanese guy, Radwan, whom I love. I love her, and I love him and her and Radwan. And we were going to see their house, which was under construction, a renovation. And she said, "Oh, well, we'd love to have you, but it's going to be a hard hat tour." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Oh, just there'll be 20 hard hats waiting. Don't worry. I'll explain it when you get there." And we got there, and the reason it was a hard hat tour was because not only was it under construction, but in the excavation of this Ottoman villa, 19th century Ottoman villa, they'd been excavating in the rear, the backyard, for a pool, and they had hit a necropolis, which meant that all renovations had to be frozen.
Poltergeist in Lebanon.
And we were amazed. And I don't know, there was a catwalk across looking down at these tombs, and what they were bringing up, because the state had to be involved. Nothing could be moved without being recorded, cataloged, et cetera, et cetera. And it was fascinating. And I love Indigare because there are experiences like that, because you're relying on this sort of spider web of international friendships, and someone wants you to see this and someone wants you to see that, and you try to shoehorn in experiences that you wouldn't have if you were just a regular traveler.
I also appreciate in this moment in time where we've been stuck behind doors, the commitment to this is how we get to know other cultures and people and friends and sisters and brothers, across the globe. And we got to keep traveling. We got to
We have
keep.
to keep traveling. We have to keep making friends. We have to keep discovering new friends, new families that we choose. Um, I think that's what's fascinating about social media, is if you navigate it in a responsible, intelligent way, that you can go traveling and say, oh, I'm going to um, Jaipur. Oh my God, I know somebody in Jaipur through Facebook, but I've never met them. Could
Yeah.
I visit you? Where would you say I should go? I think that's the value of social media is having friendships with people you've never met. And hopefully one day you will. And if not, it doesn't really matter. You still have a network of human beings who will
Connection.
change your viewpoint.
Yeah. What is so book, travel host, American editor of World of Interiors, writer, Instagrammer of amazing moments and observations. What do I not know about? Because um, co-founder of
Oh,
Irvin.
Irwin Lane. That's like a company that my husband and I started about a year or so ago, and I am nominally the president. He's the actual mover and shaker. Designs furniture, obelisk bookcases. Really, he does a lot of shell work now. Um, and it's a great little firm, and you can look it up on Instagram at Matthew Zwisler, Zwissler on Instagram. Um, and it's a fun little company. I come up with ideas, he shoots them down. Um, yeah, it's
How
my it's
lovely.
I
I
love
wonder
it's
if
my
I
life. It's my
that.
life.
Um,
Um, and I cook a lot. I like to cook a lot.
so yeah, back to that culture. I thought culture. However you can get it.
Well, but for me, food is um, history. I think I have about 300 cookery books, and um, I like to weirdly have like a dinner where it's France 1918, or you know, I don't know, Spain, 1958. I do all these weird things, and we look up the music that would have been played at that time, um, and we have, over COVID, it was very small, but we've sort of starting to come back, and having people and sort of having a little history lesson through food and wine and music.
That's like that's a what do you call it? What you study in college? You pick one. You pick
Oh, what is that?
a
I know
word.
what you mean.
Well,
But
any
that's what we do. We don't dress up, but
that's your favorite.
but it's a lot of
I
fun.
learned that in a heartbeat. If you just and add books in, and you're done.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to do it, and I'll sort of stand up and talk about what the next course is, why we chose this one as opposed to that one. Um, Sometimes they're dismal failures. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they food goes to the dogs. Sometimes it's saved for breakfast.
Yeah.
And luckily we have a 5-year-old who's really interested in food, so she has her own little children's cookery books, and she goes through Instagram and watch, what is it? There's some wonderful Instagram jellies, something about jellies. We're always looking at jellies, molded gelatins and things. And she's like, I want to make that, or let's go there. So she feeds into our obsessions.
How lovely. I would love to just squeeze a dozen books out of you. A cookbook with musical accompaniment defined on the page. Uh, I want an Instagram book of forgotten style makers. There's so much I want from you. So it is 7, so I'm going to let you go and get to
All
work.
right.
But you have,
It's time to make
but
another.
you have to do these books.
Well, it's funny. I'd rather
Books,
I'd
right?
rather have lots of ideas and farm them out to amazing writers and help them negotiate that subject.
So would you have a printing press? An imprint?
I don't want to have a printing press, but I'd love to have an
Not a,
imprint.
not a printing
An
press.
imprint would be heaven.
Okay, we're gonna put that out into the universe.
Okay.
So great, because that's what you need, Mitch. It's another job.
Just one more would be helpful. Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You're
It's
so
been a delight.
you're totally inspirational, and I love you to bits. Kisses.
Love you, dear.
Bye.
Bye.